Hi everyone, it's Leon and I'm back again to make Shogi videos. Sorry for the long break, I was busy over the past few months, so I'll just do a quick update. Last month in June, I was participating in two Shogi tournaments, right? A local one and an Asian team tournament, so I was very busy preparing for those tournaments. Happy to share that I managed to win first place for both of them, so that's great news. However, after that, I fell sick. There was a new strain of COVID circulating around Singapore at that time. It was a very aggressive strain that took a long time to recover, and I was sick for about 3 weeks. So I'm just finished recovering, and I hope to get back to making shogi videos. Another thing I want to talk about is the new format of videos that I plan to make. Now I'm going to immediately follow up a game with a post-game analysis. So I'll play a game here on Shogi Wars 10 minutes game, and after that I will do the analysis in Lee Shogi and I'll package it into one video. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, onegaishimasu. My opponent is 3 dan. And I'm Sente. Right, my opponent is not showing his intention. He could be playing static rook, he could be playing ranging rook. He doesn't wish to show what he plans to do, so new kid, watch out for that. Alright, central rook. Now he has shown his intention. Right. Pretty unusual move. The gold move. Signaling slow game. But I wonder if I have an opportunity to start a rapid attack, because right now this structure is a little bit unstable. So for instance, I could attack with silver 3-7, planning for pawn 3-5, pawn takes, maybe even silver 2-6. Yeah, I'm very tempted to start attacking right now, because the shape is a little bit unstable with the gold here. If you're still on here, there's a possibility of go to 3-2 defense, but let's see. What can I try here? Let's give silver 3-7 a shot. Let's just go 0-4-6. And then pawn 3-5. Yeah, alright, so he switched back to third file rook, but that means the pawn push on the fifth file was a turn pass. Ineffective move. So I'll just go for this. Bring the rook over. Let's change the bishops. Sort of a standard-ish attacking line, just that my opponent has an unusual shape. And now I have to think about what to play. Normally Ranging will be castled into Mino here, but in this case his king is a bit close to the battlefield, so it's not as good as a Mino castle. Just gonna pull this back. He might just play silver 4-3, ask for the rook trade. But yeah, this feels like a worse version of playing the Mino defense. 0-2-5 is very strange. Yeah, I can't avoid the trade, so I'll go for it. Alright. So now he has a silver that is in a very bad position. Besides that, it's a full piece trade, full major piece trade. Should be pretty good for me. Just need to figure out how to convert this. A little bit tricky. Let's start with a rook drop first. He's probably gonna drop a rook here, then it's a bit tricky. Yeah, okay, I need a bit of time to think about this. I don't want to take the lance right away because I want to keep the threat of the rook taking the knight. Knight is a more valuable piece in this position. So let's just start with is that a good move? Yeah, let's just give it a shot. So if it takes this, I'll take the knight. And if it takes a lance, I can take the silver, taking advantage of the silver being out of position. Alright, now I just need to watch out. He's already down material, I just need to defend properly. Let's start with this, simple. If he attacks again, I'll probably play a bottom pawn here. Right, looks like a turn pass. This attack is too slow. Yeah, this is just straight up too slow, shouldn't be working. I might even be able to ignore that. If I go here, threatening horse takes gold. Maybe here is better. I'm not sure, both look good. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. I don't need a bottom pawn here, I'm just gonna go here. Yeah, this pawn push in the center is a very bad move by my opponent. It's just way too slow for the board setup. Yeah. This is a trap mate starting with horse takes gold, knight takes gold, and go drop here. Pretty simple. Yeah, here we see the big difference between a Mino castle and this unusual castle shape. Right, if you were a Mino castle, the king will be further from the battlefield, the silver will be on 7-2. So my attack will be a lot slower, but this is a disadvantage of playing this sort of king structure. It's just way too dangerous. My opponent probably defends by dropping a piece here, but even then I don't think that's a good defense. Like... Just wonder if I fast enough, if knight drop takes, and then just take. I can just rip it off actually. Yeah. So knight drop here, knight takes, silver takes. Takes, bishop drop. I still have a knight drop from his knight block. So yeah, that's not going to work. The defense is not going to work. He can drop a bishop here maybe, but I don't think that's going to help much either. Giving up too much material. And he won't have a metal piece at the end. So yeah, this is not working. This is straight up not working. Straight up not working because I'm gonna rip the knight off. I still have the knight drop here and set up a square grab dragon. Yep, still the same. I'll just rip it off. Doesn't matter which we capture. Taking is gonna lead to checkmate. So okay, now he defends, but maybe I can start with a silver drop. Takes. If bishop takes, I take again. I have 2 golds, so this is a checkmate. Alright, thank you very much. Arigatou gozaimashita. And now let's move on to the analysis. Okay, so I've ported the game over to Lee Shogi and let's get started. In this game, my opponent went for a central rook opening, but he did not show his intentions at the early stages of the game. As we can see, after the move 0 to 4-3, there is still the possibility of going for a static rook strategy, going for a Gangi castle. This is quite popular nowadays, it's a pretty modern strategy. Or he could also switch over to ranging rook. Either central, 4th file, 3rd file, 2nd file, all of these options are available. And the idea is that against a static rook opening, in the event my opponent goes static rook, I don't really want to castle my king right away because then my king becomes very close to the battlefield. And also, if you take a look at the generals here, these silver and gold, they are behind the king, right? And so they can't really protect the king effectively from an attack from the front, right? If my opponent wants to attack from the front, I want the silver to be forward position so that it can help protect the king from frontal attacks. And on the other hand, if my opponent goes for ranging rook here, then the fight is going to take place on this side of the board. And so I want to castle the king to the left as quickly as possible, right? To get it as far from the battlefield as possible. But in this case, I was not sure what my opponent's intention is. And so I went on to play pawn on 3-6, just saying I'm keeping both my options open, right? I can castle my king left. In the event he goes for static rook, let's say, just an example, I could do something like this, right? I can bring my silver on top. That way it's protecting the king, and now my king is safer from attacks from the front. For example, the game can continue like this, and this is just an example match, right? Where I'll bring the bishop back, I'll push this pawn here, and you get a equal game. Yeah. And so pawn on 3-6 is sort of just a waiting move of sorts. Of course, it sets up attacks at the later stages, but I'm choosing my move ordering so that I can either castle my king first, or I could bring my generals up first, depending on the situation. Now my opponent went for central rook, so clearly this is a ranging rook strategy, and my king wants to castle right away. But before that, I just play a pawn to 2-5. Then we went for castling. And I want to mention this move go to 5-1. Right, in the actual game, I was talking about how this is an unusual move. The idea is that maybe a better move was just king to 8-2 right away, castling, bring the king further away from the battlefield. Remember that in a static versus ranging rook game, the battlefield is taking place here, right? So you want the king to be as far from the fight as possible. And the idea is that if you play something like king to 8-2 and you keep the goal on 4-1, you create a lot more options for yourself. For example, this goal can come over here in the event of a rapid attack, right? To help further support the defense on this side of the board. So for example, let's say, if I just attack here, pawn to 4-6, threatening to go pawn to 4-5, takes, exchange the bishops and break, you can just defend go to 3-2 and this structure is very solid. And so go to 5-1 in this kind of move, it takes away options from Gote, right? Once you play go to 5-1, you can't play go to 3-2. I forgot to mention also that another idea that you could try, let's go back. So 0 to 8-2. So king to 8-2. At this point, I mentioned pawn to 4-6, that's go to 3-2 defense. And if I tried for the attack like 0 to 3-7, for example, right, you can play 0 to 7-2, 0 to 4-6, you play rook to 3-2, and look at this. Now that your rook has left the 5-2 square, the goat can go to 5-2 now. So this goal on 4-1, if kept on 4-1, you create more options for yourself. You can play go to 5-1, you can play go to 5-2, you can play go to 3-2. And by playing go to 5-1 so early, you're taking away a lot of these options. Right, for example, now this side looks a little bit weak on the third file because the goat has left the position. And can't go over the 3-2. And also, like, if the goat can't go over the 5-2, the frontal squares like 5-3 and 6-3 are a little bit weak. And that's why, after looking at this move go to 5-1, I was quite tempted to start a rapid attack. That's the easiest way to try to take some kind of advantage, because if I just slow down this game into a slow game, I could go, let's say, steady rook Anaguma or something like that. But then he'll be able to slowly improve his structure and eliminate all those weaknesses. So in this game, I try to go for 0 to 3-7, aiming for a rapid attack on my opponent's bishop's head. And my opponent went go to 6-2, 0-4-6, and pawn to 5-4. I want to make a correction here. In the actual game, I mentioned that this move is a turn pass. It's actually not completely true. It's just that king to 8-2 is a much more valuable move to play here. You really want to get the king as far from the fight as possible. And pawn to 5-4 is like not completely useless. For one, it takes away the option of the 0 going over the 5-5, which we'll explore in another line. But yeah, in this case, king to 8-2 is a much more valuable move. And I went straight for pawn to 3-5, rook to 3-2, pawn takes 0 takes rook to 3-8. This is a pretty standard attacking line. He goes for the bishop exchange to counter attack. And here, he plays 0 takes to 2-5, which is a very unusual move. In the actual game, I was mentioning 0 over to 4-3, offering the rook trade. This is actually also a pretty standard defensive idea for ranging rook. Right now that steady rook has opened up the position, ranging rook just wants to exchange off all the pieces. Right, the game can continue here, here, and pawn drop, 0 takes, and rook 3-1, just for example, right? But then again, we'll see that ranging rook this time, his castle is not ideal, right? His king is on 7-2, is very close to my attacking pieces, as compared to the standard Joseki where it's on king on 8-2 and 0 on 7-2. So I'll just do a quick comparison, right? Let's go all the way back to the start. Yeah, so from here, rook to 4. Let's say my opponent just goes for a more standard 4-4 rook defensive line. Alright, and then the game continues. Castles, and let's say I try the same attack. Still the same idea. Attacking the bishop's head, bring the rook over, he opens up the bishop line, exchange the bishops. And I mentioned that earlier, this pawn of 5-4 has some kind of advantage because it stops the 0 from going over the 5-5. But in this case, Ranger did not play pawn of 5-4. In fact, he didn't have time to play pawn of 5-4. So that's why the 0 went over the 5-5. And then 0-4-3, exchange takes. And we get into this sort of endgame. Right, this is a more standard Joseki endgame, where Steady Rook has the initiative, right? We just exchange off the major pieces, the rook and the bishop, and now it's Steady Rook's turn to play. So he has an initiative, but his king is weaker, right? He has the boat castle versus the Mino castle from Ranging Rook, right? So what's going to happen is that because Steady Rook's king is weaker, it's likely that he's going to be one move slower in a very sharp endgame. But because he has initiative now, it's his turn to play first. He can drop a rook first before ranging rook. It sort of cancels each other out, and we get into this very difficult equalish kind of position. The computer says that considering for all the factors, right? Steady Rook has initiative now, Ranger has Sparrow King Castle now. It's just slightly better for Ranging Rook. It's like maybe 50.5% against 49.5% in favor of Ranging Rook. And just some of the possible follow-ups will be, let's say, pawn on 3-4. And there are two options. Ranger can take this. Ranger can also drop his rook here. This is a very, very difficult endgame. So just to give some examples, let's say Ranging Rook drops the rook first. The idea is to give up this knight first, a temporarily exchange, but then he's going to bring the dragon back and capture these pieces. He's going to be a little bit slower in the capture game of the knight and lance, but Steady Rook has a pawn shortage and Ranger still has a better king castle. The dragon is also a very strong defensive piece, so it's a hard fight. Right, the other option is that he can just take it right away, and he goes rook drop, takes, and bishop drop, right? This is also a very difficult fight, right? The rook needs to keep an eye out on the silver, so Ranger has to use the bishop to try to collect the knight and the lance. He is going to be a little bit slower in that aspect, right? The bishop will not be in a very good position after capturing all the small pieces, but he still has the safer king. So that's the idea. But now if we go back to look at what happened in the real game, right, even if 0-4-3 is played, I can exchange off the rook and bishop, and this time Ranger no longer has his advantage, right? Because his king is on 7-2, is very close to the battlefield as compared to the earlier example where the king is on 8-2. So I think this game is a very good example. It highlights the importance of castle strength, castle safety. It highlights the key advantage of Ranging Rook being able to castle his king over to 8-2 very quickly and claim that he has a safer king compared to both castle. Because if Ranging Rook does not take this advantage, he no longer has anything to show in this position. Because look at this, you know, it's a full piece trade. Both sides have pretty equal defense, right? I have a boat castle, my king is on the 7th file. You have some kind of weird castle, right? Some sort of reverse grow in the house castle, right? But also the king is on 7th file. Right, so we are sort of equal in terms of king safety, but I have the initiative. I can drop the rook first, and that's likely going to lead to me being one move faster in the endgame. Right. So anyway, yeah, regardless of whether he plays 0-4-3 or 0 takes 2-5, it was already a very hard fight for my opponent. He went for 0 takes 2-5, which is again a very unusual move. because this time the silver is very far from the rest of the generals, so it's likely going to end up being an idle piece. Not to mention it's very easy to create forks and attack this piece. Generally, you don't want to be playing this silver takes 2-5 move. But anyway, we continued with rook exchange and rook drop to 3-1, rook drop 3-9. And I just want to add on, in the actual game, I was talking about why I didn't want to take the lance right away. So maybe I would want to talk more about it right now. There are two disadvantages to taking the lance right away. So for example, if I take the lance right away, he's going to take the knight. And look at this. The dragon is not able to pick up the knight so quickly, right? I might have to waste a move, moving the dragon back to 3-1 or to 2-2 just to capture the knight. And meanwhile, he can already capture both my knight and lance. So it's kind of like I'm already losing initiative. I'm losing the advantage I have. But also another point I want to make is that in the actual game I mentioned that the lance is not as useful of a piece as the knight, right? And why did I think that way? Well, we can give some examples. Let's say I take the lance here, right? Consider that I take the lance here. How do I use this lance to make an attack? The only feasible looking square to drop the lance is maybe on 8-6. Try to target the weak point here. However, the problem is that this attack alone is too weak, right? I need to stack more attacking pieces on this square. So maybe if I have a knight, I can drop it over to 9-5 or 7-5, right? To stack attacking pieces on the weak point. So we already come to this realization at this point that we need the knight. Like even if we pick up the lance first, in order to set up a good attack, we still need to pick up the knight. Whereas if we look at the actual game, we can actually make a good attack with just the knight without the lance, right? So it's like the knight is overall just a more important piece, and it's sort of something that just comes with experience. Looking at the board setup, you get an understanding of like, oh, here the knight is a lot stronger, because I was thinking about if I can set up a bishop here on 4-3, this is the move that I played. The idea is that I want to keep the option of the rook aiming at the knight, and also if I manage to take a knight, so let's just show an example line, right? Let's say he takes this, and in the actual game he took the lance, giving me the silver. But let's just say he tried to save the silver, right? There's some kind of attacking line that can go dragon back to 3-1, dragon takes lance, and knight drop 5-3. Right, you can see that I do not even need to take the lance in this position. I can set up a very powerful attack already, stacking the attacking pieces all on the go on 6-1. My opponent cannot recapture this knight because then he loses protection of the go on 6-1, and this is a simple checkmate with horse takes 6-1, and then we just chase the king all the way, getting a checkmate eventually. And already at this position, my opponent is completely lost, right? He can't play go to 5-1. The dragon takes it. If he plays go to 5-2, I'll discard the bishop. And again, after go recaptures, it loses control of the 6-1 square. So I'll bring the dragon here, grab this gold, and Renjiro's castle is completely shattered, right? We can see that a lot of this problems stem from the fact that his king is too close to the battlefield, right? That's why there's so many like fast, sort of like instant killing techniques that can arrive, that can exist in these kind of positions. So that's why in the actual game, I dropped the bishop. I want to keep the rook aiming at the knight so that once my opponent's rook leaves the protection of the third file, I could pick up the knight. Comes with a nice little attack on the silver, saying that, hey, if you take the silver, if you take the lance, I'm just going to take the silver. And my opponent just ignored it. So I take the silver and now up material, right? So already this position is really, really losing for my opponent, right? He's down material, and I already have two very powerful major pieces, right? The dragon and the horse. Horse is already nicely aiming at the goal of 6-1. I just need one more move to reposition my dragon, either the 3-1 or the 3-2, and then I can set up powerful attacks like Knight Drop on 5-3. Alright, but anyway, my opponent went Lance 8-4, Silver 8-5, and I want to mention also the importance of endgame, right? This was the final key mistake that my opponent played in the actual game. A better attempt, let's say, might have been something like Knight to 6-4. With the idea that I'm going to take this piece and attack the silver, right? So let's just show some example. Let's say I ignore it. He's going to take this. Right now he's taking the silver, and if the silver runs, he can take this pawn, pulling this king away from the protection of the gold, and set up an attack like this. Right, so this would still be a better attempt. The attack is faster, much faster than what he did in the actual game. Although this kind of move, knight to 6-4, is still insufficient, because one very good defense is just to drop the silver on 6-5. So this is a Joseki. Place a silver on your opponent's knight's head, right? Because the silver not only attacks the knight, it also protects against where the knight is attacking. And here this silver is not a purely defensive idea, because what I can do is I can take this knight, right? Forcing pawn recaptures and exposing this weakness on the 6-3 square, which I can utilize with, let's say, a knight drop 7-5. Right, so just to give a quick example, let's say my opponent pass turns, I can just like drop a knight here, and already I'm exposing this very, very weak point on the 6-3 square. Let's say he pass turns again, I just take, and what's a good move here? I can maybe even just promote, right? Takes, and takes, something like that. Maybe not the best example. I didn't really expose the weakness on the 6-3 square, but anyway, point is it was still a very losing position for my opponent, because after the silver drop here, he doesn't really have any good attacks anymore. He just only has the bishop in hand, no very good squares to drop the bishop. But what he did in the actual game is even easier for me to win, because pawn 5-5 is just too slow, right? Look at this endgame, right? Here's how you can like try to improve your endgame abilities. If you look at this endgame, I have a dragon, a horse, and I have 2 pieces, a silver and knight in hand. I also have a pawn in hand. Now the pawn is not really counted here because I don't have any good pawn drops, right? I'll break the rule of 2 pawns and lose the game on the spot if I drop a pawn somewhere close to my opponent's king. So the pawn is not really an attacking piece here. It's too slow. But the idea is that even not counting the pawns, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 attacking pieces, right? And there's a Shogi proverb that says, with 4 attacking pieces, your attack cannot be stopped, right? So at this point, already I have a very, very strong attack. I don't really need to defend anymore. I don't need to slowly collect, I don't need to try to slow down my opponent's attack. I don't need to try to collect the lance. I have enough firepower. I can just go straight for the kill, right? And this attack, knight 5-4, is just way too fast, right? This pawn push here is just so slow. It needs to take this, it needs to take this, and it needs to also take this before it really creates any kind of real threat. So when knight drop here, pawn takes, and I just ignore this again. I don't even need to recapture this pawn because it's just too slow of an attack, right? I bring the dragon over to 4-2. And this is a threat mate. I'll just quickly show you. Very simple idea. I'll start with horse sacrifice. He cannot recapture with the gold because it's pinned. So he has to take it with the king. And then I can take the gold also. He has to take it with the silver. I'll drop the gold. And just keep chasing the king to the edge, right? That's checkmate already. Right? So already at this position, I'm threatening checkmate. And in the game, I was mentioning that my opponent probably need to drop a piece here just to defend against checkmate, right? And maybe, yeah, actually no, both drops are just not effective. It's just that knight drop is a little bit easier for me because in the actual game he went knight drop, but I can just take it, take this the gold here, and regardless of which recapture he does, let's say he takes it to silver, it looks a little bit safer. I will still take the knight, takes, and he can draw a bishop defense. This is what I was calculating. But look at this, right? Because he dropped the knight to 5-2 earlier and I took it, now I have a knight in hand, right? So I can sacrifice a knight on the 6-4 square. If he runs, I'm just going to take the bishop, right? Even if he runs the 7-1, protecting the bishop, I'll just rip it off, right? Because this is a checkmate, like this. So he has to accept the sacrifice, but I can drop another piece. This is called square grip dragon check, so I can take this, and this is also a forced checkmate. Yeah, in the actual game, he took it with the gold. Doesn't really matter. I'll take this. Taking this back is an immediate checkmate, right? With the same ideas of sacrificing the knight here. So his last defense was bishop drop to 3-5, but it does not solve the checkmating problem, right? I continued with silver drop to 6-1. So the idea is this, if it takes it, I would do a nice little double check with both my dragon and my horse. And the nice thing about double checks is that my opponent can only defend by moving the king, right? He can't block the dragon. He can't block the dragon's check because the horse is still landing a check. So he has to take the horse, and a nice little gold drop to 5-1 will be checkmate. So at this point, he has to run the king, which is what he did. But then I just rip off the last gold general in his defense. And after bishop recaptures, dragon takes, he resigns here. He resigned because after he recaptured, I have 2 golds in hand. I can drop a gold here and drop another gold here, and this is checkmate. Right? Meanwhile, my king is still very, very safe. This pawn push is just way too slow for this game. Alright, so that's the end of the analysis. I hope that I talked about a couple of key pointers that could be helpful for many of you watching this video. And I'll hopefully see you soon. Alright, that's all. Thank you.